Hi, and welcome to the final presentation of today's ABG Sundal Collier Investor Days. My name is Jacob Lemke. I'm an equity research analyst here at ABG, following the healthcare space. As our last presentation, I have the honor to present Intervacc and the CEO, Andreas Andersson. And with that, I leave over the word to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us, and thank you for listening in. So let's get started. So next slide, please. All right, so Intervacc, we are developing modern vaccines within animal health, and these are based on recombinant fusion proteins. We have a lead product that has just been granted market authorization by the European Commission 1 month ago. And we are on track for launching Strangvac here in Europe during Q4 in 2021. We are addressing the animal health market that has shown to be very resilient here during the pandemic, with good growth both before the pandemic and during the pandemic. And we have a pipeline of vaccines that we are that we're developing together with our world-leading partners, the University of Karolinska Institutet here in Stockholm and the Swedish University of Agricultural Science, SLU, in Uppsala. We're a Swedish company and we are listed on Nasdaq First North. Next slide, please. All right, so let's talk about Strangvac and this exciting news in the phase we're in now. So we have just received a month ago the final approval from the European Commission. Strangvac is then developed by, it's a multi-component fusion protein subunit vaccines. It's one of those modern ways to develop vaccines that enables you to develop vaccines with an excellent safety profile, and it contains no live agent. It's an intramuscular administration, and that's very important because that is the way that equine veterinarians prefer to vaccinate horses. And it's important to have an easy to administrate vaccine if you want to reach a dominant position on the global market. Strangvac has shown up to 94% efficacy in clinical trials, and that is after a third booster dose. And with Strangvac, we are addressing a large global market where we believe that we can take a dominant position. Next slide, please. So the disease that we are addressing with Strangvac is Strangles. So Strangle is one of the most, if not the most, frequently diagnosed infectious equine disease in the world. There are some 60 million horses in the world, and we have said that we, in our primary markets, Europe, North America, Australia, New Zealand, Middle East, there are about 1/3 of those horses live, so about 20 million. And in those areas, roughly half are medicated or in a vaccination program today. So those 10 million horses is the first target group for our vaccine. But we are aiming at the whole global market. Strangles is highly contagious. It's a dreaded disease that horse owners really fear. It can be lethal. 1 to 2% is often a number that is mentioned. But even if the horse survives, it can have very long-lasting effects. And one of the effects here is also that it's so contagious, so that an outbreak becomes very, very costly to control. In Sweden, you're recommended to isolate the whole stable or the horses that are affected for at least 3 weeks after the last horse has been cleared as infection-free. So those isolations can last for weeks or often months, with devastating effects for the horse owners and with causing large suffering among the horses. Strangles is quite common. So if we are comparing to, for example, equine influenza. In Sweden, we have often less than a handful of outbreaks per year. Sometimes in an outlier year, maybe 10 outbreaks, but often less than 5 outbreaks per year of equine influenza. And for Strangles, it varies between around 40 and 120 outbreaks per year, so much more common here in Sweden and in many countries. And of course, one of the big reasons for that is that we don't vaccinate against Strangles as we do against equine influenza, or at least in most countries we don't vaccinate so much against Strangles. So our aim is that with vaccination rates similar to those of equine influenza, we should be able to drive down the outbreaks in this devastating disease to similar numbers. And that is really our target. Next slide, please. So let's take a look at where we are now, and let's look back a little bit on the regulatory process. So we submitted this dossier to EMA back in the beginning of 2020. And now, about a month ago, we received market authorization from the EU Commission. So that means that we are now market authorization holders in all the European Union. If you take next slide, please. So what that then means is that with this market authorization holder, we now can address the European market. There are some administrative steps after the actual market authorization has been granted, and that is things like the local languages has to be approved, and you want the vaccine to be available in the local registry so that veterinarians can access it. Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein also base their approvals on the work that has been done by EMA and the positive opinion. So we have also received now market authorization from Norway here in the end of August, and also Iceland followed here in the 30th of August. During this process, the Brexit was implemented, and that meant that when we submitted the dossier, the UK was part of the EMA process, and during this process, the Brexit was implemented, and the VMD took over the approval process for the UK. And the VMD gave what they named as a positive outcome here in the beginning of July. And we are expecting to receive the final formal approval of the market authorization for the UK as well here in September. So there's a few differences here, what's included in the process. Whereas for EMA, those different languages and the final packaging approval was after the formal market authorization approval. That step has been included in the VMD process. So that is one of the reasons why this has taken a little bit longer time. But we do expect that the UK will also give this formal approval within the next couple of weeks. We are, as I said before, aiming for the global market for Strangvac, and we will go into regulatory processes also for markets outside UK and Europe. And so we are most now looking at the US and Canada. In the US, this is handled by the USDA, so the agricultural part. And then we're also looking at Australia and New Zealand, and we have initiated dialogue with all those countries. We expect to receive approval for those in the next during 2022 and 2023. The process in the US is we can use a lot of what we have done for EMA, but there will most likely be a requirement for some local studies in the US and Canada as well. So we'll have to come back to you with an update on exactly when we think that we will have the approval also for US and Canada. In Australia and New Zealand, as it looks like now, there's no requirement for local studies, so that's a little bit more straightforward. Many countries outside of Europe or US and Canada base their approval, or you can use a lot of the work from either the US approval or from the European approval. So as we look at the global market, we can roll those processes out, and we intend to sell Strangvac globally. Next slide, please. So looking at the global market, I think it's important that when you look at vaccines, we target a large proportion of healthy horses. So whereas in many medical products, you target horses that are sick and you want to treat. So out of those 60 million horses in the world, approximately 1/3 of those is what we call our primary markets. And in those markets, 30 to 60%, and in some countries like Sweden, even more than 60% of the horses are vaccinated. And we believe that horses that are vaccinated against other diseases should also vaccinate against strangles. When a horse enters into the vaccination program, it then often stays in the vaccination program for the rest of the horse's life. So it becomes a recurring revenue. And how many times that a horse vaccinate per year is somewhat depending on the horse situation, and is something that we discuss with your vet. But as from an investor point of view, we calculate with an average of 2 times per year for a horse that's in the vaccination program. Next slide, please. So we have then also during this year, we have signed a distribution agreement with one of the largest players in the world. This is Detta Pharmaceuticals. So they are now the exclusive distributor for the European market, excluding the countries where we will sell ourselves, which is primarily the Nordics and the Baltics. So this is a 5-year agreement based on transfer pricing and some milestone payments. Now, Detta is an excellent partner for us. And one of the reasons we choose Detta is that they are so strong within equine. So Detta is number 8 in the world when you look at core animal health. But for equine in Europe, they are around number 4, the way we calculate, with an ambition to grow. And whereas equine, for many of those larger pharmaceuticals, it was a business that was previously within the livestock or production animal segment, and then has moved over the companion segment where they compete with cats and dogs. Detta has kept it as its own segment, so they has an extra focus on equine, and about 7% of their turnover is within equine, and that is high in comparison to other potential distributors here. And we really like that focus. They're especially strong within pain management, but are now also focusing on vaccines, and that is very good and for us, and Strangles plays an essential part of this strategic growth. Next slide, please. So looking then at the interim report for the first half year, the big news here is that we did receive the EU approval in August, and we expect to start selling here in Europe in Q4. Also worth to point out is that we have a strong cash position with 145 million Swedish crowns in cash in the bank, and a quite manageable cash burn. So for the second quarter here this year, it was minus 7.7 million Swedish crowns. So I think that's a strong message that we have a very good position. We also mentioned that we have sold and delivered the first antigens for Strangles ELISA test, and this summer. And we don't think that it's going to bring in a very big revenue, but it's important for a strategic reason. So we want to make sure that those antigens are available for manufacture of those tests. That gives Strangvac's DIVA capacity, and that is with those tests. You can separate and see if a horse has been vaccinated or if it is sick with strangles. And that's very important for a number of reasons. And it's more of a strategic marketing initiative from us than a business of its own. So those, I think, are three main points that we want to highlight from the report. Next slide, please. Okay, so looking at then animal health, we're going to go through it really quick here, but it's about $40 billion US dollars in what we call core animal health, where vaccines are one in the center of this. Quite easy to understand growth factors from the farm animals. It's increased demand for animal protein, and in the companion animals is that we're spending more money on our pets. And then there's new treatments available, and vaccines are in the center of this. So this whole segment has been growing by 4 or 5% per year. Vaccines a little bit more than that, and one of the drives there is also that with the pressure to use less antibiotics, the infection pressure increase, especially within farm animals, and then the demand for vaccines increase, because vaccines are one of the tools that we can use to combat infections. If you push again, I think there's an animation there, right? So I think during the pandemic, it's been given a lot of attention to that there many more dogs have been found a family and been bought. That same is true for horses, or at least if you look at Agria, the largest insurance company here in Sweden within animal health, they reported an increase in the number of insured horses with 19% from 2019 into 2020. And I don't think that there's 19% more horses in Sweden, but I think the reasons behind this is that more horses are insured. And because horses are changing owners, and also that you see that it's worth to insure your horse, and you're spending more money on your horse health. And we believe that the same trend is also if there's more horses insured, we also think that point to that the number of horses that will be vaccinated or are vaccinated also increase. And this is a trend we see globally, and it started before the pandemic by as many trends. It's accelerated during the pandemic, but this is the trend that we think will continue. Next slide, please. So it's a very nice environment to navigate in with the highlighted focus on zoonotic diseases and the One Health. So there's and antibiotic resistance. There's a good potential for us to receive grants and support for our research. Next slide, please. So our technology here, we're using a technology based on fusion of recombinant proteins. It's one of those new modern ways to make vaccines. Even though the research technology has been there before, it's now in the late few years that you can really use this in a mass scale and have products to the market. And within this technology, we are in the very forefront of using fusions of recombinant proteins for those bacterial infections where you want a really broad immune response. So using those long fusions, and we are leading this technology race. Next slide, please. So looking a little bit on our pipeline, Strangvac now is about to be launched in the market here in Q4. We also have 2 projects here, one Streptococcus suis, where we are targeting pigs, and Staphylococcus aureus, where we're targeting the dairy industry or dairy cows where this bacteria causes mastitis. Next slide. For both those projects, the Streptococcus suis project and the Staphylococcus aureus project, we are making good progress. So we are testing both in pigs and in cows, and good progress, and we keep investing with high hopes of reaching success. Next slide, please. We're also are very active in publishing in scientific journals. This is important for our marketing and educational campaigns. Next slide. And also, with the phase we are now, we are working with other organizations to raise awareness of Strangles, both in Sweden and abroad. Next slide. We have a good mix of share owners, and if you look at the latest list here, there are 2 new shareholders, investors that have reached the list here with ABA Försäkring and Capital Group Small Cap World Fund, that I think are interesting and large new shareholders as of June 30th. Next slide, please. Operating during the pandemic. So there's a lot of focus on vaccine development, and I think this field is making great leaps and play a big part of future health, both within human and animals. There's an increased awareness during the pandemic of zoonotic diseases, and important to combat those diseases already within the animal sphere. There has been supply chain challenges, and there's an interest in local machine manufacturing. Okay, so next slide. To sum up, we're on track for a commercial launch here in Q4 with Strangvac. On track for UK approval. We're preparing regulatory process here in other markets, and we have a very exciting platform based on the same technology. Now I think it's time to move over to some Q&A. So next slide, and that's over to you.
Thank you. I think we have time for one question. And so achieving the EU market approval is obviously a huge milestone for you, but it also sort of shifts the focus from being a research and a clinical development company to more of a commercial focus company. What are some key aspects or key focus points to drive the adoption of Strangvac commercially?
Okay, so key focus for now is we're doing those awareness campaign in the general public. We're not really allowed to market a prescription vaccine directly to the horse owners. So we are doing educational campaigns to the veterinarians, and we're working closely with key opinion leaders so that they can, in their turn, come up with their view on how this vaccine should be used. So I think that those campaigns and those educational and marketing activities are key right now.
Okay, I think I will shoot in just one quick question. So you plan to launch in Q4, but could you maybe go into a bit more details on how you plan to launch?
So that's a discussion we're having now with our distribution partner Detta, so that we are launching this in a way so we make sure that we can meet the demand. We don't want to risk running out of vaccines if we launch in too broadly at once. So we envision that we will have a controlled launch and then ramp up as fast as possible.
Okay, I think that was all the time we had. Thank you very much, Andreas. And as this is the last presentation of today, I would like to thank all the people watching and also all of the 34 companies we had here today presenting. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for listening.